Summer routines live or die by how easy they are. And honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the show. We are recording from the Aquarius Home Services Studio. This is Wooden Sticks on the Talk North Podcast Network. I am the host of the program. My name is Kevin Gorg, and we chat all things hockey here on a weekly basis. We try to connect with the men and women that have connections to Minnesota that have done great things in our favorite sport, and today is no exception. I had the privilege of covering Alex Stalock, both as a college hockey player up in Duluth when he played for the Bulldogs, and also as a member of the Minnesota Wild. Connected with him for years when he played out in San Jose, and of course watched him play his high school hockey in South St. Paul. And he was a flamboyant, borderline flaky, fun goaltender on the ice, super athletic, very skilled. Off the ice, just an absolute tremendous person and beloved on every team he played for. You can go to high school and you can track him through the USHL, wherever he played. When you connect with people that have played with Alex Stalock, if you knew him, you loved him. He is legitimately that guy. He brought out the best in players like Mikko Koivu, who were cranky every single day. And I can say that, and I would say that to his face, because we do see Mikko around the rink throughout the season in St. Paul. He was very intense and he was very abrasive. That's just the way he approached the game. He had a lot to do, and he was a leader, but he would lead by example, and Stalock would always needle him, always get him laughing, and always seem to bring out his best. Al's that guy. And I think an important position to have that personality. When you're a goaltender on a hockey team, you're kind of like the pitcher in baseball or the quarterback on the football team. People look to you to be that person, not just, an important position in the game, but an important personality to calm the waters. And I think teams feed off quarterbacks, pitchers, and goaltenders. Maybe it's the point guard in basketball to settle things down when things start to get a little haywire. And Stalock just had that capability, had a tremendous career. And as you're going to find out in our conversation today, he's kind of come to the end of that career. And, we're going back 20 years ago when he was still playing high school hockey here in Minnesota at South St. Paul. And to think of the places he's been, throughout the United States Hockey League, up into places like San Jose and Anaheim and Chicago and Toronto, and of course his hometown team, the Minnesota Wild. It's been 2 decades of greatness for this man. And he is not built like other goaltenders. He's not 6'5", 230 pounds, and able to use his size to his advantage with the way the equipment has evolved at that position. He's under 6 feet tall, almost like a unicorn these days in the National Hockey League. So he did it with great athletic skill and work ethic. And trust me, as you'll learn in our conversation today, he put an awful lot of work in to get where he got. And boy, did he have a hell of a run. So we'll celebrate that today. We'll have some fun stories. We'll even kind of touch on playing through the pandemic, because Stalock was a member of the Minnesota Wild when the world shut down, and that world included NHL hockey. And when they got back to it, they had that summer playoff with the Vancouver Canucks, and he was a fixture on that hockey club. Kevin Fiala was in his prime. It would lead Kevin Fiala to that big contract with the LA Kings. It would lead the Wild into that great trade where they got a first-round pick and Brock Faber. So I think both teams ended up getting something pretty special out of that deal. So it'll be fun to hear from Minnesota's own today here on the show with Alex Stalock, South St. Paul's own. And speaking of keeping it local, I got to thank my good friend John Schweitz. We do a podcast together called The Kindness Chronicles, which is a charitable endeavor. And charity is kind of the fixture with John's company, because John works for the Freemasons here in Minnesota. When you hear Freemasons, I'm sure you think of the secret handshakes, those goofy hats, and maybe those pancake breakfasts. But Minnesota Masonic Charities would prefer that you also think about the work they do right here in our community at places like the Masonic Cancer Center at the U of M or the Masonic Children's Hospital, and of course, the Masonic home over in Bloomington. They're just a few examples of the important work that John Schweitz and the Freemasons do and support right here in Minnesota. It's the largest fraternal organization in the world, and Masons have consistently answered that call when it comes to charitable needs. I'm so happy that John Schweitz and Minnesota Masonic Charities are a part of our show here on Wooden Sticks. And when we come back after this quick break, we bring you the great Al Stalock. Welcome back to Wooden Sticks. We're recording from the Aquarius Home Services Studio. Very excited for our special guest today, South St. Paul's own Alex Stalock. Al, great to have you on.
Great to be here. I've heard a few episodes, and I was wondering when I was going to come up in the rotation. And it's my turn, so it's my turn to deliver, and I'm looking forward to it.
How's the summer been? I know you're kind of at a crossroads right now from chatting with you before we started to record that, this might be it. And you've had an unbelievable career. You've got a lot of family activities going on with the kids and with Felicia right now. So how has this summer in particular been for you?
It's been awesome. Kind of at the end of last year, we kind of knew that this was probably going to be it. And I had the ability to get Felicia and the kids down to San Diego and watch their final game. And my parents and my brother flew down as well, and got to catch a game as well. That was kind of the last time, seeing me play live. So that was really special. And then heading into summer, I knew it was just going to be nice to kind of decompress and not have to always have that in the back of your mind about, when it's time to ramp it up, competing for a job at training camp, and all that, and it was a nice feeling to kind of just be able to relax and focus on family time. And, youth sports kicked in right when I got home, and I was able to help with my son's baseball team out here with Lake Elmo. And I had so much joy just being in the dugout with these kids that were playing a game just, for the love of the game. And there was no pressure on them, just to go out and have fun, have a smile on their face. And it was so refreshing to go from, the professional side of sports to the youth level and to baseball at, really its purest form was really fun.
And no question, it's been a great run. It's a privilege to be a professional hockey player and get paid to do something that you love. And anybody that knows you, anybody, Al, that's watched you knows how much you love the game of hockey. So what are you going to miss the most? Because I can tell you, getting ready for training camp and the grind of not only camp, but the preseason and then the length of the season with the travel, being away from your wife and kids, I know there are a ton of sacrifices. So there are some things that are going to be, I think, a benefit to retirement. But what are you going to miss the most about the cadence of a hockey season?
Like you said, the travel and all, being away from the family, as soon as you start growing a family and you have kids and you have a home base, that's obviously a whole new element. But like you said, what are you going to miss? The game of hockey has brought so much to not only me, my parents, my wife, and my kids and brother and extended family and friends in the game. But just the team aspect of it. The game on the ice is obviously one thing. The competitive nature. You want to win every game. You want to put on a show for your fans, especially your hometown fans when you're playing. When I was playing with the Wild, but there's so much more to the game than just what people see at 7 o'clock at night. And the locker room in the morning for practice, plane rides, bus trips, hotel rooms. That's the stuff that I'll truly miss is where you actually build the team aspect of the game. That's where I really thrived and had fun with that part of the sport. And, the amount of people that put their work in to make it as enjoyable as possible to be in the NHL. I'll never forget, all the trainers and staff and coaches and media members that made it so enjoyable to go to the rink. And at the end of the day, I'll always miss waking up and being able to go into a locker room with 23 guys and sit down and have a coffee in a lounge and bullshit about what happened the night before, or what's going on at home, or what happened in the at the game. And that's definitely the part that I will always miss.
Well stated. And let's go back to where it all began. This was Wooden Stick, so we like to go back to the start of the whole thing. And when you were just a little guy, were you thinking NHL, college, high school hockey? When you grew up in South St. Paul, it's such a mecca. And people that don't know, at the time it was Wakota Arena. Now they call it Woog Arena, as we honor Doug Woog. But that is a very hockey-centric community. How much of your dream when you first started putting on skates was NHL related? How much was high school hockey related?
I mean, of course, I think even before on the ice, you're in elementary school, early in elementary school, what do you want to do when you're older? And I think every kid says professional athlete or professional hockey player. And I think that was my goal, and there was no changing it. And not knowing, what it would take to get there, it was really easy in first grade to draw a picture of a hockey player and say that's what I want to do when I get older. But it took a lot to get there, and obviously without the foundation from being raised in South St. Paul, a blue collar community that, like you said, thrived on the game of hockey. Well before I went through the youth hockey program there, it set me up to, I think not only be the hockey player that I eventually became, but the person I became is, coming from, surrounded by good people, good family friends. I was really fortunate to have, great friends that, we never steered off course, and we always had fun and competed with each other, and, you know, stayed out of trouble, which was the biggest thing. And, I'm always grateful to say I'm a Packer, and um, it's a very storied, obviously, city for hockey, and they still go down to what is now Woog Arena, and it's really cool to see, obviously, the not only the men's but the women's state championship banners, or the tournament banners, hanging from the rafters, the retired jersey, and the history all over the walls is really special. And I still get texts to this day from people that I've met, whether it be Chicago or different cities around the NHL, that end up bringing their kids, and they had to go down to Woog Arena and see pictures of players that have went through there, and it's very special to at the end of the day say Sault St. Paul's where it all started.
Were you always a goalie? Like when you first started playing, did you start? I think a lot of times in mites, I remember from a personal perspective, my very first game in mites, I played forward, and then after that, I went into the goal and I stayed there. What was your journey like?
Very similar to that. I played out. I mean, I don't think many parents bring their kid to be a goalie, right? Or I hope not. I guess I'm just starting to get into the youth side of the sports for hockey, and um, it's every kid shows up with player's gear, right? It kind of you kind of get pushed into one position, and if it so happens to be goalie. But I think for me, having an older brother that was only a year ahead of me and in sports was obviously, I don't know if you call it great or good or bad for my game, but in order to hang out with their friend group, which happened a lot, was that they needed a goalie, whether it be street hockey or on the ice in the winter. And if I wanted to hang out with my older brother, it was getting that, and it slowly morphed into, ended up just always being a net. But like you said, I was really fortunate at South St. Paul to skate out and play forward all the way through Pewees, which is very, very rare. But with the numbers we had at South St. Paul, and it just so happened to work out at the time, and I could the nights I wasn't in net, every other game I play forward, and it really benefited me learning how to play the game and seeing the game from a different aspect. And I'll always be grateful that I got to do you know play forward, play D, and play out. Where a lot of these kids now, I feel so bad that in mites you're a full time goalie, and they don't get to learn the game from the other side.
How much of that impact the way you play the puck? Because I think anybody that watched you play at South St. Paul, UMD, or in the pros got to see a guy that was one of the top, if not the very best, at the offensive puck playing skills a goaltender can bring to the table. Was that the precipice for that? And how much did you work on that skill as you developed into a standout in goal?
It did help a ton. I think as you got older, you realize how much it benefited your defenseman to not take as many hits. Obviously, you're, at an earlier age, you're trying to always make the long pass and trying to make stretch passes, but you realize that you get older that that's not as effective, and it's more a lot of times a 6 8 foot bump pass to defenseman to not allow him to get smashed into the glass and put him into a bad spot. So I think it evolved over time, but it did take a ton of work, and I'm really lucky that when I did skate out, I was a left-handed shooting forward, and in net, I am left-handed when I play the puck, so that's really a huge aspect of the puck playing part. But you look at a youth hockey practice, and at the youth ages, not a ton of coaches or assistant coaches may know what to do with a goalie when you're doing teamwork in one zone, right? And you get bored. I mean, everybody, if you know me, you know my mentality is I can't sit still for longer than a couple seconds. So as soon as they started doing some penalty kill or some in zone work, I was at the other end firing pucks off the glass or firing it at the net and just trying to stay busy. And I was still, I know by the end of my career, probably killed the coaches too, but they'd be trying to talk and I'd still be screwing around with the puck at the other end. But it's amazing how the little stuff like that actually does carry over into games, and it's something that I worked on every day, whether it seemed beneficial or not at the time. But when we get comfortable handling the puck, I think it's such an effective piece for a goaltender now. And it's a high percentage of goalies that really do come out and play the puck and do a really good job at it nowadays. And it's a fun position to watch.
I think when you're a goalie and when you start on that journey, you end up trying to watch other goalies and mimic what they do. For me, I was a kid of the 1970s, and the first NHL game I attended was the North Stars facing off against the California Golden Seals, and they had a goaltender who would end up playing in Minnesota years later in Joe Malash. That was remarkable. He was quick. He was athletic. This is back in the era when goalies would get down and back up real quick. It's not the block and slide we see in the game today, but he was the guy that I mimicked my game after as a youngster. Who was the goalie that impacted you the most as a kid that maybe you tried to emulate when you were playing?
For me, it was obviously Marty Brodeur. I think the way he
Oh,
obviously not only played the puck, but the way he made his saves, it wasn't a traditional butterfly. He went one knee down and reacted to a lot of saves and didn't rely on just blocking and letting the puck hit him. He fought pucks off. He directed pucks into the corner. His rebound control was really good. His feet were good, but his hands were incredible, and obviously his mental side of his game was very very good. And he was a guy that seemed like was always on TV. They were always in the playoffs, and for
hmm.
me, he was a guy that I really thought was fun to watch. And I mean, obviously, he had a very very long career, and one of the best to ever play the game. So for me, it was a great role model to watch and try to model my game after.
So you're getting going. You're playing youth hockey. You're every kid in Minnesota. Your goal is to end up playing varsity hockey. At what age, Al, did you realize that not only might you be a starting varsity goalie at South St. Paul, but you might have aspirations beyond that, and you might be good enough to one day play college hockey at that position? Because I think that's a big part of the dream when you're a youth hockey player.
Yeah, right, and it's so tough. Both my mom and dad, they weren't hockey players, so they didn't know a ton about going through the next level. What was junior hockey? What was college hockey? Trying to navigate all that is tough for a kid going through it. And my brother was a year ahead of me, and he went through the same process. And I think when you finally make the varsity team, you're just so happy to be a part of the group that you played with growing up. Since you guys were mites, and that was the coolest thing in the world, is just to get to the state tournament. And we, unfortunately, we did my junior year, and it was obviously very special to share the ice with my brother. But some of the closest friends I still have to this day, and we still talk about it when that group gets together, some of the funny moments throughout the tournament or the memorable moments, whatever it may be. But even then, you don't know how this whole process works. And then you get a call all of a sudden from a team that, hey, we're heading to the USHL draft. We might take you. But, at the time I was going into my senior year of high school, and I didn't know how all that worked. If you were going to lose, ability to play high school hockey if you went to a tryout. So going through all that was a learning experience, and I was lucky to get drafted by Sioux Falls in the USHL, and they ended up keeping four goalies, I think, after a tryout. So I had to make a decision: do I go back to high school hockey, or do I risk going to this tryout and maybe getting cut and now coming back and have, where do you play now? And I got really lucky that Mark Carlson in Cedar Rapids took a chance on me, and he ended up trading for me that summer, knowing that they kept four goalies, and
Hmm.
I ended up playing for a coach there that really, really taught me not the game of hockey, how to on the ice, but off the ice, how to prepare, how to be, a grown adult away from home for the first time. And I still think that was the biggest step in my hockey career from high school to juniors. Not only the skill level, the size of the guys, and obviously leaving high school after your junior year is really tough. You got to bypass your senior sports when you're probably supposed to have some of the most fun of your high school career. And it's a very tough decision. And I still look back now. It was hard, and you got to make sacrifices. And that was one of probably the biggest sacrifices I had to make in my hockey career.
And I can relate. I waited until the summer after my senior year. I got drafted by the Des Moines Buccaneers, and the USHL. It's an amazing league, but it's quite the grind. And as you mentioned, Al, it's your first time away from home, and for you to do it a year earlier when you're that much younger, and I had a lot of growing up to do, and that was a very impactful year in my life. So, how valuable was that time for you? Knowing now, of course, we know that you've had this long NHL career. You've been able to bounce around and be a really key fixture wherever you've gone throughout the NHL and these organizations. But how much did that time away from home, learning how to do laundry for the first time, learning how to budget your time to work out? I just remember the grind of the schedule, the travel, the sleep buses, the road trips. It was ridiculously exhausting. Even though, you're 17, 18, 19 years old, that year kicked my ass, and it was good for me. I needed that.
Absolutely, it was. I do remember the first month. I don't know how many times I called my parents and said, "I'm coming home tomorrow.
Me
I'm done. I'm
too.
coming home tomorrow." And I was missing our high school football team. We had a hell of a team that year. They ended up going to the state tournament, and my parents probably got called every night about 9 o'clock saying, this is it. I'll be home tomorrow. And, they just, thank God for them. They kept saying, just give it one more day, give it one more day, give it one more day. And, eventually it did get so much better, and it was so fun. And obviously a ton of credit to, I had an awesome billet family down there that I had for 2 straight years. And, they were still to this day, they came to a game recently in Chicago, and we still keep in touch. So that's obviously really special. But that year set you up. Obviously, going into your second year of junior was so much easier. Your friends were going off to college. You were going, to be in your second year of juniors and feel a lot more comfortable going into that level of play and feeling like, hey, it's time maybe I can, you know, excel at this level and be a top player versus just trying to fit in and just trying to feel like you can make it. And so that was a ton of fun. Obviously, to get through that first year, we had a great team and a ton of success that year, and we knew we were going to have a good team our second year. But I think it led into obviously what was next with college hockey and being prepared to be on your own again with a ton of different stuff that other college kids are doing and learning how to, hey, this is my goal, this is what I need to do, and this is where I need to focus.
So how did you end up at UMD? Were there any tough choices? Were there different schools that you were looking at where you had to really make some tough choices? And were the Bulldogs always one of your top picks?
I did go on. Visited a couple other schools. I visited St. Cloud State, University of Minnesota, and I also visited Michigan, which is a funny story. I was supposed to visit Michigan, and my parents were going to meet me out there to do my official visit. And we had a terrible storm down in Cedar Rapids, so my parents made the flight, and I didn't. So I didn't go on my visit. My parents ended up going and doing the whole visit just with the coaching staff and maybe a couple other players that were with their parents or whatever on the recruiting trip. And I ended up doing mine like 3 or 4 weeks later on my own. But they ended up going to the Michigan State Instant Classic at the Big House, and
Oh yes.
I missed that. I think it was 2004. I can't remember the wide receiver at Michigan State, but Yeah, it went down as one of those instant classic games. It was on ESPN the next week, but I missed out on one of the best college football games ever at the Big House. But I was fortunate to go back, and my one of my ex teammates I played with in San Jose took me on my tour of campus there. So still to this day, that's a pretty funny story. We laughed about Mike Brown, who was a tough guy for many years in the NHL. Took me on my first college visit at Michigan, and then I finally wrapped up going to Duluth. And I remember my family sitting down. We went to eat with Sandelin. We did all our touring and all that, and sat down with Sandelin. And I remember I was about 15 miles down the road, and down 35, and I called my dad. I said, "Nah, I'm going to Duluth." And it didn't take long. It only took about a little bit south of Cloquet maybe, and I knew that's where I wanted to go. He said, "No, are you sure that's your decision? You got some other coaches you got to follow up with, and you make some tough phone calls that say, hey, I just think this is a great fit for me." And turns out, it was a great decision, and I loved my time at UMD, and still get together with a lot of those teammates and see the coaches quite a bit.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've had the chance to work college hockey over the years, to do all kinds of different things with Coach Sandlin, and he is without a doubt one of my very favorite humans in the business. He's just one of those guys that you always enjoy running into, catching up with, talking the game with. I can't imagine uh, taking a college visit, having a chance to play at UMD, and then meeting him and saying no. I just can't imagine it. He's just that guy.
Yeah, no, he is. He's down to earth, no BS. Tells you how it is, whether it's good or bad, and he wants you to go out there and work hard, right? And I think you see that with all of his teams, and why he's had success in the last how many years, year after year after year. Duluth turned into a perennial powerhouse, and it's so cool to see the success. Not only obviously the staff's had, but the players they get in there, and a lot of players that move on to play in the NHL or at the American League level. And it says a ton about his staff and what he's built there, the culture he's built, and like I say, calling yourself a Packer, it's always fun to say you're a Bulldog, and I take a lot of pride in that.
I'm looking at your number right now at UMD, and they get dramatically better every single year. Like, I mean, dramatically better from year one, uh, year three. You start by going 5-14-3, and again, I'm a former goalie, so I know that you're at the mercy of the team in front of you. But your save percentage is like 881. By the time you finish out, you post 20 plus wins, and your save percentage is 924. So, how much of that was the team in front of you, and how much of that was the maturation of your game?
Right. It was there was a lot of that went into it. I mean, our team obviously we grew. We were young when we came in. We got two really skilled players with the last name Connolly, one from Alberta and one from Duluth, Minnesota. That as little 5'7" freshmen put up, I think, 50 some points their freshman year, which obviously helped their group. Um, my interim goalie coach Bill Watson, who won the Hobie in 1984, was it?
Yep.
Um, he was my goalie coach that went out there, and I think he shot about 480 pucks on me before practice started. And he probably had more of a sweat than any of our players did by the end of practice. And I think just learning the schedule of college hockey, right? Managing your time, managing your classes, getting the right amount of rest, knowing when to have fun, and obviously knowing when it's time to focus on hockey. And it takes time. Obviously, Cedar Rapids and junior hockey set you up for it, but when you get to college as a freshman, it's an eye-opening experience. Now you're living with four hockey guys. You got no parents. You got really, no itinerary, right? You have to build your own itinerary, know where you're going every day for your classes, and then be able to make it down to the rink for, 3 hours at the rink, whether it's going to be working out or skating, and then, you know, cooking your own meals and figuring out all that. It takes a little time. And, but I do think obviously the biggest thing for that is we saw our team grow as a group, and we became more skilled and gained trust in each other. And that core group eventually ended up going on to win the national championship 2 years later.
It's pretty amazing. And at that about that same time, when you're a UMD Bulldog or about to become a college hockey player, you get drafted by the San Jose Sharks, 112th overall back in 2005. For a Minnesota kid, and a pretty down to earth kid. What was that moment like? And take us through the process of learning that you were picked by the Sharks.
So this is actually a great story. One of my favorite humans in the game of hockey. Everybody knows him here, Darby Hendrickson. I had one interview with the New Jersey Devils, and it was out at like St. Thomas University, their campus. And we went out there, and when I showed up, Darby at the time, he must have, I don't know where he was at in his career, what team he just finished with, but he was going out to do some physical testing with them. And we all know what Darby looks like. When I show up, Darby's on the treadmill and he's doing like the VO2 test. So he's got the mask on and they keep cranking the treadmill up. They keep tilting it up and the speed. And he's at like 12 minutes and there's no slowing down. And he keeps going and keeps going. He maxes the thing out. I think he gets to 15 minutes and he's barely sweating and gets off. And I'm standing back there watching. It's like a 17-year-old kid being like, are they going to really throw me on this treadmill right now? There's no way I can get on there and do this. And, I didn't know who Darby was. I know, obviously, I knew he played for the Wild, but, there wasn't, hey, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. And thank God I didn't have to do any of that physical testing, but I just did an in-room interview with, their brass or the front office at the time. And, it was pretty intimidating, but I was like, well, I guess if I get drafted, it's going to be with New Jersey. So I ended up being up at a buddy's cabin, and I saw that there was another goalie from Minnesota that got drafted by the Devils, I believe, in the second round, Jeff Frazee, who played at the University of Minnesota. And I was like, well, no chance I'm getting drafted anymore. And you don't know how this whole thing works, who's been watching you. And sure enough, I get a text late that night that I get a bunch of texts saying that I was drafted by the San Jose Sharks. I'm like, how in the world did a team from San Jose, California come and watch me play hockey, And, I think, obviously, Minnesota scout Pat Funk spent time, probably did some homework. He had a daughter that played for South St. Paul, and Tim Burke obviously has seen a million hockey games. The head scout at the time was San Jose. And at the time, you don't know anything about San Jose hockey other than maybe you have a Patrick Marleau card laying around somewhere. And well, little I found out, going through that organization after college hockey, it was probably the best thing ever that could have happened to my career.
Yeah, Pat Funk was one of the assistant coaches when I played at the University of St. Thomas. All-time great dude, just a hilarious guy. And as you mentioned, connections to South St. Paul. I just remember all the years working at the X now in broadcasting where he'd come in, he'd have the San Jose Sharks gear on, he'd be talking about different players. And there was a time when he told me what he thought of you as a player and just how good you were and the potential that you had. So Funky believes in you. The Sharks make this pick. You have this really good career where you progress year after year after year in the WCHA playing for UMD. It eventually leads to an NHL debut. You only get one. It looks like yours was off the bench, Al, if I'm reading this right. So take me through your emotions as you play your very first NHL hockey game.
It was. It was off the bench, and it couldn't have been any better because if it would have been a start, I think there's no sleep for probably 2 days, and you're probably not eating. So it couldn't have been any better. It was. At the time, our American League team was in Worcester, so it's a 6.5-hour flight up, and or flight over, I should say. And it was my first recall. So my parents did fly out to San Jose and make the trip, which was very lucky. But we were playing Arizona, and I'm on the bench enjoying the NHL, chewing some bubble gum with my hat on, thinking this is the best thing in the world. And we're playing, at the time, San Jose, I think the year before, was President's Cup champions, and we're playing an Arizona team that we probably should beat, and it's 2-0 in the second period, and then they go up 3-0 from a goal from maybe one of the biggest hockey personalities right now. Paul Bissonnette scores the third goal on Niemi, and I'm staring straight ahead like, no way, and he's not going to do it. And I still remember Todd McClellan walking down the bench and telling me to get in there, and your heart goes from probably 80 to about 190 in a matter of a second. And I come hopping over the boards and go in there, and obviously the team in front of me did a great job. I don't know what the final stats were. I think I might have had like 8 shots the rest of the game, and we ended up scoring 5 goals. And
wow.
we won the game 5-3, and it was I think it was Patrick Marleau's 1,000th game, so it was a pretty special night. And to go in like that, obviously saved a lot of wasted energy to have to go in halfway through the game instead of thinking about starting for a few days.
Well, you and I both know, and if the listeners don't, I got to tell you, when the Sharks were at their peak and when that building was full every night, you'd be hard pressed to find a louder arena in the NHL than the Shark Tank. So down 3-0, you come in. I don't care how many saves you had. You're a part of this comeback on a night where they're celebrating 1,000 for one of the most popular players in the history of that organization. I can only imagine that the roof was shaken.
Yeah, it was that was your first real experience of being in there, especially on the ice, and it was a tiny little taste of it, and it made you obviously want so much more, and you felt like, hey, I've got here now. It's time to try to figure out how to stay here, and from there, there were some ups and downs, obviously, with injuries and going up and down and getting a game here, getting a game there, but. Just being around that locker room, being around that guys, being around the group of guys they had there, it put in your mindset like I have to be here, I want to be here, and I want to be part of this, and it kind of set up for obviously the next few years what the potential is going to be.
And part of that potential would be ending up playing for your hometown team, which I just think is spectacular. Knowing that you're a sports loving Rube, and now I know you away from the rink, this had to be pretty cool to find out that you're going to be playing for the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a tough end in San Jose. It wasn't having a great year. I got moved to Toronto. Didn't play a ton there. Went on waivers right away. It was when they were kind of tanking for Austin Matthews that year, and they weren't trying to win a ton of games down the stretch. So I ended up being in the American League to finish the year, and came back in the summer not really knowing what was next. It's your first time going through something like this in pro hockey. Your time's up. Your contract's up with San Jose. Your first time going to be a free agent, and you get a few calls, but one of them happened to be Chuck Fletcher at the time, and he had an honest conversation with me saying, we loved how you played and we love your career so far, but we want you to go down to Iowa and reset, find your game, and there's potential to be here down the road, but we want you to go put some work in, and so that's what my next step was. I got to go to Iowa, which was an unbelievable place to play in the American League. Was down there and got great work. I had Newsy as a head coach, who's obviously now behind the bench in Detroit, and I had Freddie as my goalie coach down there at the time, and he was honest with me. He worked my butt off. He made me practice hard every day, and I ended up having a pretty good start to the year there, and I think I played about 40 games down there that year, and ended up getting a recall later in the year, and kind of stuck around during the Wild's playoff run, and then next year came in training camp focus that I wanted that job, and I was fortunate to be able to win a job for my hometown team, and it was obviously very special to finally put that jersey on.
I remember a lot from covering you in those years with the Wild, but I think what stands out to me is you were a part of the club that played through the global pandemic that was COVID-19, and I'll never forget it because sports shut down, the world basically stopped, and then we had that crazy summer playoff series against Vancouver that you were a big part of. What was it like from your perspective, Al, to go through that time frame, being an NHL hockey player, knowing that you had to stay in shape, knowing the game was shut down and you might come back, you might not. I mean, we had no idea what was going to happen next, and it felt like it took forever.
Yeah, it was a goofy year. We kind of started slow out of the gates. There were some trades that happened. We fired a coach. We got a new head coach. And we ended up catching fire like right around Christmas time. And at the time, Fiala was probably one of the best scorers. He's scoring almost every night, it felt like. And we were starting to catch fire, and we were almost winning almost every night and climbing back up in the rankings. And then all of a sudden, we get home, we're playing Vegas in the morning, and we come into the rink, and everybody's told to go home. And we're like, what the heck? And you started seeing stuff around social media that, the NBA is getting shut down or whatever, and you never thought it would happen, but here we go. We were in a tough predicament, and early on, it seemed like, we'll give it a week. Okay, it's looking like 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks turned into a month turned into two, and you did your best to try to stay in shape, but it was a goofy time around the world, and you couldn't really leave your house. Nothing was really open, and we'd have Zoom calls with the league and our team trying to figure out what was next, and then just like that in a hurry, you get news it's going to be go time in end of July, August. So we had X amount of time to get prepared and skate with the team. And at the time it seemed goofy, and you seemed like you were going to be trapped in a confined area with 8 other NHL teams, and it was going to be tough. But I think that group and me especially, it was an honor just to be a part of that whole thing. Like you're probably the only time in NHL history you're going to go through something like that. We hope, and
Yep.
we at the time it seemed tough, it seemed hard, and seemed like a summer hockey camp. But at the end of the day, it was pretty cool. You got to go to any NHL game throughout the day that you wanted to go watch, and have sweet tickets to playoff hockey. And obviously, no fans was tough, but it was. I'll always remember that playoff run, the season with that group, and it was very interesting. But it was obviously something I'll remember for the rest of my life.
I just remember Kevin Fiala could not be stopped, and as that series progressed, Vancouver picked up on that and started paying a lot of extra attention to him to kind of tilt the scales back in their favor. What I also remember is that video you guys put together during the pandemic break, where all the Wild players, or a bunch of you
Oh
guys,
God! Oh
led by
God!
Marcus Foligno. Yes, yeah, you
Yeah,
guys put
yeah,
together that Steppenwolfer Born to Be Wild video, and I'll never forget. The best part of the whole thing is at the end of the video, it's in your basement, in the Stalock basement. You come down the
yeah.
slide. You guys had that big kind of jungle gym set up for the kids, and the thing breaks, and it was one of your kids that just completely melted down. As your
Melted.
youngsters get
Yeah,
older, you're gonna have to show that back and have some fun with this.
yeah. We haven't watched it in a long time. I don't know if the coaches or management was happy with that, to see me go down a slide and break it. If they were wondering where I was at with my physical shape. But yeah, that was funny. I still remember getting a memo from Aaron Sickman about, hey, we got to do this, and I think there's a lot of texts being like, seriously, we got to go on camera and sing, and we had fun with it. And I still owe my daughter a slide, because that sent her in tears, and well, not a very happy moment for me through the pandemic, after sitting around for a few weeks and not doing much other than probably eating.
I got to tell you, part of the PR crew that was working during that tenure hooked me up, because years later I'd remembered how damn funny that thing was. So I had them email me the video,
Oh
and
God,
I'll have to share it with you. No, honestly, it is
they still
really.
have
I love it. It's one of the, whenever I get cranky or get down about something, I'll go to
it.
my saved emails and find it and watch it. It just makes me smile. It is Zuccarello on that motorcycle, the Eck
Oh
piece.
yes, it's
There are
so
some really
accurate to do that.
interesting videos. Yeah, well, I don't know. That
Yes,
Zuccarello thing is weird, but it's very funny.
yeah. He's got that sense of humor. He's one of the funnier guys that I played with. He's great to have in the locker room, and keeps it light. But it was yeah, there was obviously some different personalities that came out in that video. To see Acker go on it and do his thing is pretty funny. But I'm glad they did it, and kept it light. And we ended up having fun with it. It was good. But you do have to email that over to me. I got to show my kids. I don't know if they've seen it.
I'll send it over to you for sure. Final couple things here. We do a thing called the hat trick hot seat at the very end of the show. We'll give you 3 quick questions, rapid fire, no wrong answers, Al, just some fun. And I'm going to start with this one, and this might be a hard one, but I want one person. I don't want like, oh, this
No,
guy's
my
good.
God.
The best
Yeah.
player. I don't care if it's practice. I
Oh,
don't care if it's summer hockey. I don't care if it's playoff hockey. But the best hockey player you ever stopped. You made the save, or at the moment, or there was a game where you shut them down. Who's the best player that you faced?
Connor McDavid. I think I stopped him once when I was in practice with him, when I ended up in Edmonton for a short time. But he just firsthand being on the ice with that guy, it's a whole different game. The sound his skates make when he tears through the ice, how fast his hands going, how fast his body's going, and his brain can actually keep up with it is pretty dang amazing. And I've had I've been unfortunate actually to have to play against him on the ice in games too. So he definitely is right now, I think, the best player in the world.
Yeah, I can't argue that. He's the fastest player I've ever seen with the puck. And most players can skate real fast if they play NHL hockey, but they all seem to slow down when they get possession of the puck. He's the one guy that almost gets quicker when he has the puck, and to your point, can do things with the puck that just don't even seem real. We saw some of that in the playoffs last year. So now we'll get away from the on the ice and go to off the ice. In all your travels in professional hockey, if you had a night off with the green light to go out and have a good time with your teammates, what would be your favorite city, your top pick to have that off night?
Early on it was Nashville. I love Nashville. I love country music. It's so tight down there in downtown. You're close to everything. They got great food and great nightlife, and it's super easy to go out there. And then obviously Vegas came into the league later on, and that turned into a new favorite spot for guys to visit. But some reason it always ended up like we got Vegas on the second end of a back to back, which was very
Yes.
unfair. Whether it was I was with Minnesota or Chicago, it just seemed like we always got them on the back end of a back to back. Which whether that's good or bad, that's obviously a city where I think guys enjoy going to now. But I do still think I love the city of Nashville. I think it's changed so much, obviously, since in the last 12 years since I first started going down there. It's so much busier and whatnot. But yeah, Nashville's one of my favorite. And the rink. I mean, Bridgestone Arena. It's an awesome place to play. They do a great job, and their fan base is good.
It's always packed. Yeah, even though they've had good teams, they've had bad teams, that rink is always packed, and there's always something to do in the Music City. Final question. This will take us back to when you were a lot younger. I'm really curious here. Your first concert you attended. I want to know the venue, where the concert was, and I want to know the band that you went to see.
XL Energy Center.
Mm.
The Boss
Oh,
with my parents. I must have been, geez, I don't even think maybe middle school, but I would say late elementary. I saw the Boss at the XL Energy Center lower bowl, probably about halfway up, stage left. I still
oh,
remember I was aisle seat. It was great. I grew up listening to I love music obviously to this day, but my parents are huge Springsteen fans. I always had it on in the car, and I still am to this day. But pretty lucky to say the first concert you ever go to is the Boss, and I've seen him a couple times later on after. But I got a concert tonight. Tonight I will be
really?
going to see. Yes, I will be going to see Hootie and the Blowfish, and
Yes.
Hootie and the Blowfish, and leading off for them is Collective Soul. Interesting
Oh, yeah.
story. Collective Soul's rhythm guitarist was my neighbor this year in San Diego. So I'm gonna go see Collective Soul tonight, and then Hootie and the Blowfish will cap it off at 9 o'clock out at the Somerset Amphitheater in Wisconsin.
Oh, that's fabulous. Circling real quick back to the Boss, when you're that age, if you could get a T-shirt or like one of those concert programs, or even back then they had ticket stubs, I'm sure. Was that something you brought into school the next time you got together with your classmates to show that you got to go to that concert? Because that's a big time show, and you want to at least show your buddies that, hey, I was there.
Yeah, I just showed up to school the next day with the tight jeans and the leather vest, so they knew I was there. And I had the slick back hair, and I think I had the American flag bandana hanging out of my back
Yes.
pocket. They knew where I was. They knew where I
Oh
was.
God.
No, I don't know if mom and dad got me a shirt that night. I think the tickets were enough, and yeah, it was a pretty cool night.
Very cool. This whole conversation has been nothing but fun, and we could do this for another hour in a
We
blink.
sure
It's
could.
gone by quick. There'll have to be a part two where we can circle into that relationship with Miko Koivu and all the fun you had at
Oh
his
God.
expense behind closed doors, and of course our mutual friend Paul Allen. There just wasn't enough time on the tape today, but Al, I got to tell you, a blast chatting with you, and I do look forward to seeing you now a lot more frequently at places like the press box at Canterbury Park.
Absolutely. No, thanks a lot. Thanks again for having me, and we'll see you hopefully at the press box at the XL too for some
Yeah,
games, and being around the
absolutely.
rink, being around the guys, checking in on cards, making sure he's doing good, and then obviously watching hopefully a good Wild year.
Yeah, hopefully it's a great year for them, and can't wait to see you soon, buddy. That's Al Stalock. You're listening to Wooden Sticks from the Aquarius Home Services Studio. I'll be back after this quick break, and we'll put a wrap on today's show. All right, we're back on Wooden Sticks. We're coming to you live from the Aquarius Home Services Studio, and I wish we had more time. I try to keep these podcasts to an hour or less. I listen to a bevy, and I mean a ton of podcasts throughout my week, whether I'm walking the dogs, driving to work, out and about, falling asleep at night. I love podcasts. And I know you've got to keep them to 45 minutes to 60 minutes to keep the audience. but this was one of those rare exceptions where I had a notebook full of different bullet points to bring up with Alex Stalock, and I got to maybe a third of them. He's just that guy. He's very easy to talk to. You can hear in his personality, very outgoing, very humble, good person. I think that all kind of played out today on the show. And, it's a privilege to work in the National Hockey League at any level. And I think for almost 2 decades now, I've had that job as sideline reporter. You come and go, and teams and coaches and the numbers and the rosters and all that, it's always in flux. There are certain people that you just know, especially if they're local and they're going to live local after they're retired, that you're going to stay connected to for a long, long time. And Alex Stalock is certainly one of those guys. We're recording this Thursday, right before I head out to work at a Canterbury for my summer gig working with the Ponies. And when I get to Canterbury, I always stop in and say hi to Al and I's mutual friend, Paul Allen. And when you walk in PA's kind of perched, his little office where he calls the races from, there's like this beautiful sports office filled with memorabilia from all walks of the sporting world. PA's been on KFAN now for roughly 3 decades, and one of the most cherished items in his office is right to the right of the door, this big old San Jose Sharks jersey, autographed by Alex Stalock to PA. It's right next to his Dark Star picture. God rest his soul. And so every time I walk in there, I take a peek at that. And between the picture of Dark and the signature from Al, going back to his Shark days, probably right after he got drafted, all of us in Minnesota so proud that one of our own was going to be an NHL goalie. It's a cool piece to the puzzle that is our press box out in Shakopee. So tip of the hat to PA and to Alex Stalock. And I want to thank Alex for being a little flexible. We were supposed to record yesterday, and he was driving back from a family trip from Chicago, and the connection just wasn't good. We made multiple attempts to get it done. It didn't work out. And between him and my great producer, Alex Hagen, we were able to postpone it till today, and it worked out great because, as I mentioned, we could have gone on for a couple hours. Good stuff from Stalock there today on the show, and looking forward to other opportunities. First, we need more people to be a part of the show. We want you or someone to be one of our sponsors so we can pump up their business. Karen Cleary can get that done. All you got to do is email her, K Cleary, which is KCLEARY at talknorth.com. And of course, I'd love your input on some guests that you'd like to hear from in the coming weeks. We're getting very, very close to training camp, and I think Bill Guerin might be a logical choice to have on at some point in and around that time of the season in September. But all you have to do is ping me on social media. The best place to find me is probably on X, which is formerly known as Twitter. I'm at Gorgamatic21. Send me a quick note. Let me know if there's a hockey player, coach, manager, somebody out there with connections to Minnesota that you'd like to hear from, and I'll do my very best to make that connection. And as always, we're here to make the show better for you. And if you have any suggestions, give them to me. We'll do the best we can to make it happen. Thanks again for listening. I'm Kevin Gorg, and for Alex Stalock, this is another fun edition of Wooden Sticks.